Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I hadn't been away for a while since the whole pandemic ordeal, so for my weekend getaway, I booked a cabin on Airbnb. The photos online showed a cozy little A-frame nestled in the woods, just perfect for the relaxing solo retreat I had planned. The host, Mark, seemed nice enough in our messages back and forth. My job as a nurse has been so stressful lately, I couldn't wait for some alone time out in nature. I arrived Friday evening just as the sun was setting. The gravel driveway was quite overgrown with weeds, and I remember thinking the place looked a little more rundown than the photos let on. But hey, for $75 a night, I wasn't expecting the Ritz. I unpacked my bags into the small bedroom, poured myself a glass of wine, and headed out to the porch to soak in the fresh mountain air. That's when things started to get odd. I'd noticed a few dolls strewn about the porch, like baby dolls, but gross and dirty, with matted hair and clown makeup smeared on their faces. Definitely weird decor, I thought, but figured maybe the host's kids left them out there. I headed back inside, but couldn't shake the creepy vibe from those dolls. I rubbed my arms, suddenly feeling a chill, and double-checked that I'd locked the front door. The last thing I needed was some psycho killer busting in like in the movies. Stop it, I told myself. Too many scary stories before bed lately. I climbed under the covers, using my phone flashlight to illuminate the pitch-black bedroom. But sleep did not come easy. Every little creak of that old cabin had me jolting upright in bed. Finally, I fell into a fitful sleep, only to be awakened at sunrise by the sound of footsteps on the front porch. Groggily, I peered out the window, expecting to see Mark perhaps doing some repairs. Nothing. Just those freaky dolls staring back with their dead eyes. I made some coffee and tried to wake up. I had plans to hike today and was determined not to let my overactive imagination ruin the trip. As I sipped my coffee on the porch, I noticed something odd. Through the trees, I could see a structure that looked like a makeshift tent, like something homeless people would live in. I shuddered and headed back inside, making sure to lock the door and wedge a chair underneath the handle. Was someone living out there watching me? Surely the Airbnb host would have mentioned if squatters lived on the land. Paranoia was really setting in now. I couldn't even muster the courage to go on my hike. I spent the day holed up in the cabin, blinds drawn, jumping at every little sound. As sunset neared, I loaded my belongings back in the car. No way was I spending another night here. Relieved to soon be headed home, I walked to my car. Just as I swung open the driver's side door, my heart nearly exploded. Someone had slashed all 4 of my tires while I was inside. Panic flooded over me. I was trapped here in the woods, no cell service, no one knew where I was. Then came the banging. Someone or something was banging loudly against the outside walls of the cabin. I ran inside and shoved the furniture against the front door. The banging grew louder, the doorknob rattled violently. I screamed for help, though I knew it was futile. Backing into a corner, I grabbed a fire poker to defend myself as the door finally crashed open. A disheveled man burst in, his face obscured by stringy hair, shrieking unintelligibly. I sprang up and swung the poker with all my might, cracking the intruder across the skull. He immediately crumpled to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Was he dead? I couldn't be bothered to check as I fled out the back door, sprinting down the gravel driveway and into the woods, my only thought escape. Branches clawed at my face and arms as I ran aimlessly through the darkening forest. Finally, I collapsed against a tree, gasping for air. No clue where I was or which way led to town. Then I heard footsteps crunching on the forest floor. He was coming after me. Terror seized me as I glanced around wildly for somewhere to hide. And that's when I saw the hunting cabin just ahead, a light glowing in the window. I stumbled to the door and frantically pounded my fist against it. A scruffy, bearded man opened the door, concern washing over his face as he took in my panicked state. He ushered me inside, sat me down by the fireplace, tended to my scraped-up arms and feet. He poured me a strong drink and listened as I recounted my terrifying ordeal through frightened sobs. Thank God he was there, or who knows what would have become of me that night alone in the woods. The man, Tom, phoned the police and they arrived within the hour. Apparently, The Airbnb host was known to authorities. Mark Bradford had a history of mental illness, paranoia, and aggression. He'd stopped taking his meds and was prone to violent episodes, hence the weapons and deranged behavior. An ambulance transported me to the nearest hospital where I spent the night for observation. The Airbnb was shut down, of course. I later learned the homeless tent I'd seen was just an old shed. But that night it felt like the stuff of any horror movie come to life. I'll stick with trustworthy hotels from now on for any future getaways. This solo traveler learned her lesson. Sometimes horrors are all too real. I was so excited when I booked an Airbnb weekend getaway at a charming farmhouse in the countryside. The online photos showed a cozy 2-story home with a big backyard and woods bordering the property. It looked like the perfect peaceful escape from my stressful, fast-paced life in the city. When I arrived on Friday evening, I was warmly welcomed by the elderly host named Martha. She gave me a quick tour of the house, showing off the spacious living room with overstuffed couches, farmhouse-chic decor, and a stone fireplace that she encouraged me to use that night. The kitchen was fully stocked with everything I could need to cook during my stay. Upstairs was the bedroom I'd be sleeping in, complete with fresh linens and a quilt that Martha said she had sewn herself. As we headed back downstairs, Martha gestured toward a closed door and mentioned it led down to the basement but was permanently locked and strictly off-limits to guests. I thought this seemed a little odd, but decided not to worry about it. I figured the basement was just used for storage or housing the heating system or something along those lines. After Martha left for the evening, I settled into the cozy living room with a glass of wine and my novel, soaking in the peaceful ambience of my rural retreat. I was eagerly looking forward to spending the weekend reading out on the porch swing, exploring the sprawling backyard and surrounding countryside, unwinding and distressing from my hectic everyday routine. But around midnight, I was jolted from my relaxed state by a strange scratching noise coming from the direction of the basement door. At first I tried ignoring it, assuming it was just the old house settling or maybe some mice scurrying around, which wouldn't be uncommon in a place like this. However, the sporadic scratching continued throughout the night, making it difficult to fall into a deep sleep. The next morning over coffee, I pondered whether I should mention the odd sounds to Martha when she came by later that day to drop off fresh towels, but ultimately I decided not to bring it up, not wanting to come across as uptight or paranoid over what was likely just critters in the walls. I spent that first full day wandering the sprawling backyard and rolling fields behind the property, reading in the shade of a giant oak tree, and watching colorful birds flutter around the bird feeders. Being immersed in the peaceful natural environment was exactly the escape I had hoped for. As the sun set, I felt blissfully relaxed and carefree. However, late that night as I was trying to fall asleep, the mysterious scratching sounds returned, even louder and more insistent than before. It sounded like long nails or claws deliberately scraping across the wooden floors and walls in a way that sent chills down my spine. The sporadic scratching continued all through the night, becoming louder whenever I was about to drift off, making real rest impossible. When Martha hadn't arrived with fresh towels by late the next morning, I started to feel uneasy about being alone out here with limited cell reception. As the day wore on with no sign of Martha whatsoever, a knot formed in my stomach. That night, the scratching was accompanied by loud banging emanating from the basement door, as if something sinister was trapped down there and trying to violently claw its way out. I sat anxious and alert all night with every light on, too frightened to sleep. By the third day, I had reached my breaking point. I decided to cut my trip short, quickly packing up my belongings to get out of there as fast as possible. Just as I finished loading the car, I finally spotted Martha slowly making her way up the gravel driveway as if appearing out of thin air. My heart lurched as I hurried into the driver's seat without a word, meeting her vacant stare in the rearview mirror as I drove off. Once home, I did some research and was disturbed to learn about the property's unsettling history. Tales of previous tenants meeting tragic, premature ends there. How had I not uncovered any of this in my initial online research before booking? It seemed suspicious that the host, Martha, had failed to disclose it. When I tried contacting her for an explanation, she was completely unresponsive, doing nothing to put my mind at ease. Suffice to say, I'll be thoroughly vetting any future rural Airbnb rentals, and I won't ignore strange sounds or occurrences, no matter how charming the cottage appears online. Give me the safe predictability of a boring chain hotel over creepy midnight scratching and unexplained paying any day. This was one weekend getaway full of stress that I won't soon forget. I remember the day I booked a remote, cute little cabin on Airbnb for a quiet weekend getaway in the mountains. The online listing said it was nestled alone in a dense forest, perfect for someone looking to unplug from society and decompress surrounded only by nature. In my email exchanges with the host, an older woman named Cheryl, she had emphasized that there were no other homes or people anywhere nearby, just complete isolation. That seclusion was exactly what appealed to me, a chance to relax away from all the noise and crowds of the city. When I arrived on Friday evening, Cheryl greeted me warmly and gave me a quick tour of the cabin. It was simple but homey, with a cozy living room, a basic kitchen, a bedroom furnished with a log-frame queen bed, and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub. The best part was the wraparound porch out back, with some wooden rocking chairs overlooking the thick forest that went on for miles. As we walked around the property, Cheryl again reiterated that we were totally alone out here, no neighbors at all for as far as the eye could see. I told her the solitude was exactly what I had been hoping for. After Cheryl left for the night, I cooked a simple dinner, lit a fire in the living room fireplace, and settled into one of the rocking chairs on the porch with a glass of whiskey in hand. As I gently rocked back and forth, gazing up at the starry sky, I was overwhelmed by the peaceful quietness. All I could hear were occasional owl hoots and other wildlife sounds rustling faintly in the distance. Other than that, it was absolutely silent in a way you never experience in the bustling city. I already could feel tension and stress melting away. Around midnight, I crawled into the cozy bed, leaving the window open beside me so I could fall asleep to the soothing natural sounds of the forest. But a short while later, I was startled from sleep by the crackling of leaves and twigs outside, as if someone was walking around right near the cabin. Still half asleep, I assumed it must be a deer or other animal passing by. But then I realized the footsteps seemed to pause directly below the open bedroom window, accompanied by hushed human whispers. My eyes shot open in alarm. Who could possibly be out there this late at night? I sat frozen, listening intently as the whispers soon faded back into the night once again. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me as I convinced myself I must have imagined the voices due to being in unfamiliar surroundings. The next day over breakfast, I decided to casually ask Cheryl if any hikers ever passed by the cabin, since I thought I heard voices outside in the night. Cheryl insisted that no one in their right mind would ever be wandering around aimlessly in these dense, remote woods, especially after dark. She suggested it was likely just the wind playing tricks on my ears. With no other logical explanation, I decided to brush it off as my overactive imagination and try to relax and enjoy my mountain escape. But that night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I was again jolted awake by odd noises coming from outside. Not footsteps this time, but the unmistakable giggles and laughs of children. In my groggy, disoriented state, I stumbled to the window and peered out into the darkness, seeing nothing but trees. The gleeful giggling faded as suddenly as it had appeared. A chill went down my spine despite having the blanket pulled tightly around me. There was clearly no reason I should be hearing happy children's voices out here in the middle of nowhere. I barely slept the rest of the night, troubled and perplexed by what could possibly be going on. The next morning over breakfast, Cheryl noticed that I seemed on edge. She kindly offered to refund the remainder of my stay if I felt uncomfortable staying, but I politely declined, not wanting to come across as paranoid over a few peculiar nighttime sounds. I was probably just being jumpy and imagining things. After Cheryl left that morning, I decided to take a long hike in the woods around the cabin in broad daylight, just to survey the area and reassure myself that nothing was amiss. But during the hours I spent crisscrossing trails, all I came across were endless trees in every direction, with no other structures or signs of human life, as far as the eye could see. The isolation that had originally appealed to me now felt ominous and eerie. That third night, I was again awoken by noises. The distinct sound of footsteps crunching leaves circling the outside of the cabin, hushed voices, and periodic high-pitched childish giggling. Feeling incredibly unnerved, I wedged a chair under the doorknob and did not sleep another wink. At the first light of dawn, I hastily packed up my belongings and drove off down the long dirt road away from the cabin as quickly as I could. In retrospect, I should have further questioned Churl or just trusted my instincts and left after those first unexplained noises. But I didn't want to admit to myself that something sinister could be lurking in those remote woods, hidden beneath the cabin's innocent exterior. Now I'll never stop wondering who or what could have been outside in the night, even though no logical explanation ever formed in my mind. One thing's for certain, I won't be staying in any more rustic forest getaways touting total seclusion from society and other humans. He'd be the safe predictability of a cheesy roadside motel any day of the week. This was one weekend alone in the woods that left me uneasy and on edge, making every little sound seem ominous. From now on, I'll always listen to my gut instinct if something feels inexplicably off, rather than stick around to find out why. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.